In the early morning of Vaishali city, the atmosphere was solemn and serene. Lay practitioner Mao quietly lay on the couch, surrounded by disciples seated around him. The mood was heavy, as if the air was filled with profound contemplation. Vimalakirti, a great sage praised by many, performed countless acts of kindness, refrained from indulging in poverty, taught the Dharma, and aided those in distress, his deeds having long been renowned throughout the lands. His wisdom and compassion deeply touched countless beings, and his disciples regarded him as a noble example. However, despite his innocent acts of kindness, a subtle trace of poignant reflection appeared on his face. Vimalakirti slowly lifted his head, his voice gradually rising, low and calm, carrying a trace of profound reflection. Over the years, I have practiced virtuous deeds innocently, yet inadvertently exhausted the merits I had accumulated in the past. This sentence was like a massive boulder cast into a lake, stirring shock and confusion among the surrounding disciples. The disciples exchanged astonished glances, their hearts filled with doubt. Vimla, the great wisdom master praised by the Buddha himself, was surprisingly blaming himself for his virtuous deeds. Isn't virtuous conduct supposed to be the rightful path for accumulating merit and increasing blessings? Why is there the concept of diminishing merit? Among them, a young monk couldn't help but burst out, his tone filled with disbelief. Lay practitioners, how could virtuous deeds ever diminish merit? Not giving alms, saving others, and preaching the Dharma. Aren't these acts of accumulating merit? Other disciples also whispered among themselves, their hearts filled with doubt and confusion. To dispel delusions, cause their faith to waver. Could it be that doing good deeds might actually lead to the opposite outcome? Vimalakirti gave a subtle smile, his eyes reflecting compassion and insight. He spoke slowly, saying that people often believe that not eating is accumulating merit, preaching the Dharma is accumulating merit, and saving others is accumulating merit. In reality, if virtuous deeds are mixed with the intention of seeking fame or rewards, not only do they fail to increase merit, but they also dissipate like a leaking conditionality, gradually diminishing until they vanish without a trace. As the demonic festival's floral shade faded, the surrounding disciples remained immersed in shock and confusion, struggling to comprehend. An elderly layperson, with confusion and doubt in their eyes, asked tremblingly, "If these good deeds are also mistaken, must we then doubt the true intention behind everything we do?" Maha sighed softly, her gaze remaining compassionate as she spoke gently. Have you ever heard in the Diamond Sutra the teaching that the mind arises because there is no attachment? If one performs good deeds solely to seek blessings, such good deeds are like a castle in the air, illusory and insubstantial. He paused for a moment, his gaze sweeping over the disciples present, gently waving his hand as if to guide them on a path. For example, if you constantly harbor a sense of pride in yourself for not failing others, or desire to receive others' praise and reward, then although the benevolent act appears kind on the surface, it has lost its true nature and may instead be depleting the blessings you have accumulated in the past. The disciples were somewhat contemplative, yet they still had not fully comprehended. I recall an elder who was profoundly devoted to generosity throughout his life, hosting the poor with feasts, often providing others with food and shelter, and his reputation even spread across neighboring countries. He once believed that by extensively performing good deeds, he was reaching the highest level of merit accumulation and spiritual cultivation. He paused briefly, sighed deeply, yet at the moment of his death, he dreamed of hordes of beggars transforming into death demons, coming to claim the unfulfilled promises. His heart was filled with fear, leaving him no choice but to repent and confess, vowing to cultivate virtue with a purer mind. Why is this so? Because when he gives alms, he does so with arrogance and the desire for treasures. This mindset makes the act of giving hypocritical and, instead, depletes the merits he had accumulated in the past. After listening, the disciples began to understand the essence of the teachings, but still had doubts about the truth. The young monk furrowed his brow and asked, "It is said that acts of giving can indeed be mixed with selfish intentions, but why does preaching the Dharma and benefiting sentient beings consume merit? Teaching the Dharma is essentially helping others walk the path to awakening. Is this not an act of accumulating merit?" Vimalakirti looked at the young monk with a calm, yet deeply vigilant gaze. Teaching sutras and expounding the Dharma is inherently a virtuous deed, but if the teacher's heart arises with a sense of egoistic ability, this virtuous act becomes defiled and impure. Have you ever seen a Dharma teacher whose heart arises with arrogance, thinking, "I know more than others, I can guide them"? This mindset represents the speaker's attachment, an intangible obstacle. He continued, "If a Dharma teacher harbors the mindset of, 'I can enlighten others,' this attitude is like poison, corroding the inherently pure and wholesome nature. Although such a Dharma teacher allows people to hear the Buddha's teachings, the teacher's heart grows arrogance and increases afflictions, thereby consuming the merit that should have been accumulated." The disciples were deeply shaken, and they began to reflect on their past words and actions. Though brief, Vimalakirti's words are like a sharp sword, striking at the deep attachments and delusions within their hearts. They began to realize that even when giving Dharma talks, without performing such acts of goodness, the presence of selfishness and attachments in the mind could actually lead to the loss of merit. Vimla paused briefly, observing the expressions of his disciples, and continued, "If virtuous deeds are tainted with selfish motives, no matter how beautiful their appearance, they are ultimately flowers without roots. True virtuous actions arise from a mind as pure as a gentle breeze, moving with the wind without attachment, like spring rain nourishing all things silently, enriching the earth and blessing all sentient beings." Vimalakirti's words led the disciples into deep contemplation. In this silence, a young bhikkhu finally could not help but ask, "Layman, you mentioned that performing good deeds mixed with selfish motives diminishes merit. How, then, should we practice generosity so as to both increase merit and avoid getting entangled in attachments? Also, how can we discern whether our virtuous actions are pure and not tainted by selfish desires?" Upon hearing the disciples' question, Vimalakirti's eyes gleamed with a trace of tenderness, and a subtle smile graced his face. He spoke slowly, his tone imbued with profound wisdom. The true essence of virtuous deeds lies in the purity of the heart, not in external actions. You often focus on the quantity of giving, but neglect the inner motivation behind the teachings. If the mind is pure, virtuous actions naturally arise. If the mind is attached, merits become like a vessel with a leak. The essence of virtuous deeds lies in the purity and non-action of the mind, rather than external manifestations. He paused for a moment and continued, "True acts of goodness are not done for the sake of reward, nor for fame. True virtuous action arises when the mind harbors no slightest expectation or attachment. You must understand that the root of virtuous deeds lies in the motivation. True virtuous actions do not depend on what you do, but on performing these actions with a heart free of greed, hatred, and ignorance, embodying only compassion and wisdom." Vimalakirti then said, "If there remains in the mind a heart of repayment or an expectation of praise from others, then all your good deeds are essentially just exchanges. True virtuous actions require introspection of the heart, asking oneself, 'What is my genuine motivation for doing good?'" He further elaborated that when performing acts of kindness, such as giving, one should examine whether there is a desire to display generosity. If so, then the act is not motivated by compassion, but is an expression of vanity. True non-giving means not seeking any results or rewards, with nothing desired in the heart. Perceiving the disciples' confusion, Maha Kassapa continued to explain that all wholesome deeds must begin with the mind. The mind should not cling to external objects, Performing virtuous deeds should be like a bright mirror, unmoved by any external reflections. When giving, do not think about what I have given. When expounding the Dharma, do not think about what I have taught, but practice goodness without attachment to any foundation. As long as the mind is pure and free from attachment, merit naturally accumulates. He has a far-reaching vision, gentle yet resolute. True Shanxing ultimately does not depend on what you have done, but on whether you can act without attachment or expectation. If the mind does not rely on any external objects, letting go of reputation and outcomes, all virtuous actions arise naturally and without desire. Remember, true virtuous deeds are selfless, free from attachment. Practicing goodness is like flowing water, leaving no traces. Vimalakirti further explained that if you contemplate with the principle of non-attainment in Buddhism, all virtuous acts are performed with a mind free from attachment and without seeking fame or gain. The significance of virtuous deeds lies in having no ulterior motives, maintaining a mind pure like a mirror, and performing actions with the natural flow of a stone statue, without the slightest omission. He gazed deeply at his disciples, smiling gently. If you adopt the concept of formlessness, your virtuous actions will not be bound by any form. You will neither cling to the material possessions that are not lost, nor to the outcomes that remain unchanged. In this way, virtuous actions can truly be carried out in accordance with the Dharma, accumulating boundless merit. As the demons ceased speaking, the disciples gradually attained clarity in their minds, yet some confusion remained unresolved. A disciple could not help but ask, "Lay practitioner, since the essence of doing good lies in the purity of the mind, specifically, were the true criteria that a virtuous deed should meet?" Vimalakirti smiled faintly, his gaze kind and profound, and slowly spoke, "Your doubts are quite natural. The standard of doing good is not complicated, but it requires us to let go of all attachments. True virtuous actions should embody four core principles: selflessness, equality, non-attachment, and acceptance of circumstances. Only by adhering to these four standards can your virtuous deeds remain untainted by attachment, maintaining purity and wisdom. He then explained that, first and foremost, genuine virtuous acts should be selfless. When performing acts of kindness, the mind must not rely on any material reward, must not cling to the recipient of the giving, nor cling to the results of the giving. For example, if a person gives with the pride of, "I am giving to others," or with the desire to receive praise or return from others, then although the act appears benevolent on the surface, it has lost its original pure intention. If an ignorant person harbors the notion of "I" wanting to obtain something in their heart, no matter how much ignorance they possess, they will ultimately be consumed by selfish desires. Furthermore, he mentioned that when doing good deeds, one should maintain an attitude of equality, treating everyone impartially regardless of who they are. Wholesome actions should not be based on any form of discrimination, nor should your original intention change due to differences in the object. The virtuous deeds you perform should not be accompanied by a sense of superiority or a heart of moral superiority. For example, if a person gives charity to the poor with a sense of superiority, feeling more noble than the other and seeking a satisfaction of superiority, then this act of giving loses the quality of equanimity and cannot be called a pure act of virtue. Then, he spoke about the standard of non-desire. True virtuous deeds are performed without seeking rewards, without seeking fame, and without expecting future blessings. The motivation behind your virtuous actions should be pure compassion and care, rather than based on any personal gain or expectation. If when doing good deeds you think that because you did something good you deserve greater rewards, then the goodness of your actions loses its essence of selflessness. For example, someone may offer incense and oil at a temple to seek blessings for the next life, without ever realizing that there is an element of expectation in their heart. Thus, even if he has given much in alms, it cannot be called an act of completely selfless goodness. Finally, Vimalakirti emphasized the importance of going with the flow of conditions. When performing acts of virtue, you should follow the conditions and adapt to the circumstances without force or coercion, maintaining a calm mind that changes with the flow of causes and conditions. If a person forces themselves to do the good deed while still feeling internally compelled by "I must do this," it contradicts the principle of going with the flow of circumstances, anicca or pratitya. True virtuous deeds should be carried out anytime and anywhere, based on the conditions of the present moment, without being attached to the results or swayed by external influences. For example, if you are not attuned to the present moment and your mind is fixated on receiving a certain reward, or if you force yourself to do certain deeds, such virtuous actions lose the spontaneity and purity of acting in accordance with conditions. Vimalakirti paused for a moment, glanced at each disciple, and continued. These 4 criteria are the foundation of virtuous conduct. If you can accomplish these 4 points, virtuous deeds will truly remain pure and accumulate inexhaustible merits. If you feel anxious, expect rewards, or harbor partiality while doing good deeds, then even if the outward form of your benevolence appears perfect, it cannot be considered genuine virtue. The disciples listened attentively, and gradually their minds began to awaken. Vimalakirti's teachings were profound yet simple, offering them deep insight. The disciples of Vimalakirti seem to have begun to grasp the true essence of virtuous deeds. However, he understood that genuine practice extends far beyond merely performing good acts. He sighed softly, his gaze gentle yet profound, and continued. Doing good deeds is certainly a part of spiritual practice, but is not the ultimate goal of cultivation. You might ask, since virtuous deeds are so important, why can't they be the ultimate goal? This is precisely where many people tend to lose their way during their practice. He paused for a moment, then looked deeply at the disciples and said, "The purpose of virtuous deeds is not to accumulate merit, nor is it to exchange for future blessings. The true goal of spiritual practice is to attain inner liberation and enlightenment through doing good deeds, accumulating virtue, and studying the Dharma. You practice kindness to let go of attachments in your heart and to release the craving for outcomes, not to receive rewards for good deeds. Virtuous deeds themselves are merely steps on the path of practice. The true goal is serene non-action, completely letting go of all discriminations and attachments, and attaining freedom and liberation of the mind." The disciples fell into deep contemplation, seemingly repeatedly pondering the teachings of Vimalakirti. Vimla, seeing their silence, smiled gently and continued. The Nirvana Sutra states that good deeds give rise to awareness, and awareness can transcend attachment. Your practice of virtue is not to accumulate merit, but to cultivate wisdom through these good acts. Learn to let go of clinging, to walk through the world free from entanglement with external things, ultimately surpassing the self and liberating yourself from affliction. The true goal of practice is to perceive one's own nature through wisdom and enlightenment, realizing that all phenomena are empty. When you perform good deeds, ask yourself, am I doing this for my own benefit? If your answer is yes, then your good deeds have already been tainted by selfishness. Practice is not about creating a self-image of having done good deeds, but about dissecting this self. Eliminate all self-awareness and let go of any expectations regarding outcomes. Vimalakirti's voice is filled with compassion and profound meaning. Doing good is not about how much you have done, but the purity of your heart when doing these deeds. A true practitioner has a mind like a clear mirror, capable of reflecting everything, yet remains untouched by what is reflected. Many people practice virtue in pursuit of some form of future merit or reward. But if you expect a certain outcome, attachment has already arisen in your mind, and the virtue loses its true nature. You should discover inner tranquility through practice, eliminate all afflictions, and attain the state of liberation. This liberation is not an escape from the sufferings of the world, but a profound insight that sees through all things with wisdom, transcending all afflictions. Vimalakirti further said, "Only when you cease to cling to the results of good deeds can the mind truly be free." Remember, the essence of practice lies not in external actions, but in the awakening of the inner mind. The true practitioner walks through the world, yet their mind remains undisturbed by the turmoil of external circumstances. Through performing good deeds, teaching the Dharma, and practicing cultivation, your ultimate goal is to help yourself remove inner obstacles and allow the mind to return to its original nature. Vimalakirti's teachings are like a bright lamp, illuminating the confusion within their hearts. They realize that practice is not just about doing good deeds. It is more about letting go of attachments in the mind, relinquishing all discriminative thoughts, and ultimately reaching a state of non-abidance, non-dependence, and non-grasping. The true meaning of doing good lies not in external forms, but in the unobstructed and equal heart. Ultimately, through practice, one attains genuine liberation, transcending all afflictions, and gains inner peace and freedom.